All right. So, as CEO and founder, Nuri drives the overall strategic direction for TechSmarter, focusing on the design and development of enterprise class cloud-based messaging, collaboration, and archiving solutions to address compliance requirements for the financial sector. And Nuri, it's an absolute pleasure to have you here on this show. I know that for over 20 years, you've been thoroughly experienced in strategic planning, marketing, sales, development, product leadership, operations, market making in technology organizations, and have also taken numerous companies from the beginning to over 8 figures in revenue. So it's an absolute pleasure to have you here on the show.
Thank you.
Welcome.
You made me seem a lot more important than I really am. I look at myself as the guy at the end of the parade with the brooms after the elephant. I see myself that way. So I keep my ego in check.
Tell me more about that, and where did that originate in your path to getting to where you are now?
True story. About 20 years ago, I gave a presentation at a conference in London. And as part of the presentation, I was asked very much at the last minute to sit in on a panel. And in the panel were some of the largest investors in the world, VCs. And every one of them, I've done this and I've done that, and all of this big ego stuff. And I sat there and one of the investors said something and I laughed because frankly, what they said was ridiculous. And I won't go into who because she's still in the business and we've actually become friends. However, she said, oh, my latest investment was X. And I laughed. And the moderator said, what are you laughing about? And I apologized. I said, hey, I'm sorry, that was rude. I shouldn't have done that. And then the person who made the statement looked at me and she goes, no, tell me what you laughed at. I said, okay. I said, here's why. She made $100 million investment into a company that eventually went public and subsequently crashed and burned in an epic fashion. And I said, the largest part of that business is X. And I'm really trying to shield the people that are involved because this has been so long ago. What's the problem with X? It's extremely expensive and difficult to ship. And she sat there and she went, I never thought about that. And I sat there and like, wait a second, you wrote $100 million check, but you did not look at the product, the difficulties, and why in certain places, online sales will simply not work. You can't sell certain things. At least this was 25 years ago. Now the world's proven otherwise. But regardless, what it does was it told me that day that I taught myself that day, keep your ego in check. And it's funny because this little leather bracelet, which my girlfriend gave me, is this very simple little thing. And I have fancy jewelry. I don't wear any other jewelry but this. I have fancy ones in the other room. But the reason I wear this one is exactly that. It's simple. It's like, I'm not a religious guy, but it's like the chalice with, you know what I mean? It's not going to be fancy. It's going to be simple. And when you keep things simple, things stay simple. At least I hope so. Way off tangent. Basically, this journey for me started, I got interested in messaging when my son was a senior in high school in 2012. And I watched his messaging numbers just go like this. It was this unbelievable hockey stick. And what happens is that the kids get to stuff before the adults do. Facebook was all kids. Now the kids won't do it anymore because it's all adults. This was pretty much the same analogy. And I realized that messaging was going to become a huge part of communication because it was easier, faster, and it has more urgency. 80% of emails go unread. 90% of text messages get read in the first 3 minutes. So when you look at it from an urgency perspective, it's a huge difference. So anyhow, I got interested in messaging, began to look into that in the late winter of 2012. And then there was an event in my life which brought a bunch of trouble into my life. It's long since passed, but about a decade ago, it was front and center. And as I went through that process, what happened was I realized that if I had access to the messages that I had been sending in the year prior to this beginning, that I would have had everything I needed to remove myself from this situation.
Hmm.
And I didn't, because I had changed from an Android phone to an iPhone 4. And now as I'm sitting here with an iPhone 13 on my desk, there wasn't a way to gather that data. As I did research into it, it became very evident to me that there was going to be a huge need for other people to have this information. And looking at the financial industry, looking at medical, looking at insurance, looking at anybody that is front-facing, that deals with other people's money, has oversight of agencies to make sure that people don't do things that they're not supposed to do, it became clear to me this was a huge business. And what's happened is, in the past few years, pretty much every compliance-based regulatory agency has made this a regulation. And where TechSmarter stands out from everybody else, nobody but us can access iMessages that are sent and received. Nobody else has the technology but us. And to just give you scope, guess how many text messages, iMessages alone, are sent per second?
How many?
200,000 per second.
Hmm.
You're talking over 6 trillion a day. You're talking about, 66 quadrillion messages per year. More money than Elon Musk has.
Yeah. So what's your model in the market? And I'm curious because at some point, as you mentioned, to break into the question into two parts, you said a little bit about your thinking process as you identified there was data about the trajectory of the messaging increases and the utilization and the efficiency of it. But what was more of the internal process about actually making the decision of, all right, this is what I need to do, and how was that reinforced in your process? And then I'll ask my next question after that.
I'm actually not that deliberate in what the things that I do. I deal a lot with my instincts. I listen to the little voices in my head, if you will. Bad analogy, but it's the right one. When I realize something isn't going to be what I thought it was, then I'm quick to shut it down. As they say at Facebook, move fast and break things. That's a life I've lived for the past 30 years. If something isn't working, if something doesn't feel right, as you're doing your due diligence, and in our case with TechSmarter, we talked to 600 compliance professionals throughout the world over a 2-year period. We spent hundreds of hours interviewing them. Then we went back and we listened to all the interviews. And the more we got into the last 6 or 8 months of that process, the more it became evident that we were onto something big, especially because of the volume of messages. That's the thing that most people don't. And one last thing, I talked about 200,000 messages per second with iMessage. The second largest messaging platform is WhatsApp, and that's 150 billion messages a day. So the disparity is 6 to 7 trillion messages a day and 150 billion.
Mind-blowing scale. That's really interesting, though, that you did such thorough research ahead of jumping into it. And so how did you go about actually getting in contact with all those professionals in the industry? What questions were you asking them? So that's a heroic effort in and of itself.
Well, first of all, I worked with some really good people, and everything in business is about the preparation, right? Just like when you're making if you're barbecuing steaks, the steaks can be okay, but if you prepare them well, it's a good thing, right? It's similar in business. You have to lay your foundation, you have to lay your groundwork before you get into the other aspects of it. We basically went through, there are tools on LinkedIn, and I would recommend this to anybody that's considering doing a startup. There's so much information available on LinkedIn, and you can look up people that fit what you believe your customer profile will look like. And here's the thing. If you present it in such a way where you're politely asking for a bit of their time, you can't ask for hours, but a half hour, 45 minutes, 60 minutes, most people are willing to help, especially if they see how it might play to help them. And we basically just put something out. Like, we're looking into a solution for the messaging problem that exists. These regulations have been on SEC and FINRA and FDIC regulations since 2014. And then in life's interesting coincidences, I started reaching out to regulators. And it turned out a guy I grew up with was the vice president of new technologies at FINRA in Washington, D.C. And he had moved to the East Coast about halfway through high school, completely lost touch of him. But he had one of those names like mine that you go, there can't be another one. It's not possible, right? If you told me you ever met another Nuri Otus, you're out of your mind. Someone's texting me, whatever, right? But in this case, his name is Ethan. And we met in elementary school. And we then reconnected through business when I was on the FINRA website back in approaching 8 years ago. And he told us that this is a huge area of interest for them. Mm-hmm. So that simply added fuel to our fire. And that's exactly what's happened. Now you've got a situation where in December, it was announced that the SEC hit JP Morgan with a $200 million fine for exactly the problem we fix. JPMC is approximately 250,000 employees. They could have had TechSmarter for every one of their employees in the world, still had enough money to take everybody out in the company for a really nice dinner and not pay a $200 million sanction. And it's really interesting because no matter the size of the organization, we have customers that are a handful, a dozen people. We have customers that are in the six figures. One of our customers has over $1 trillion assets under management. They look at these things and everybody says, okay, we got to do this, we got to do this, we got to do this. And then they don't. So we provide them with a very simple way to address a problem that is literally causing organizations like the Financial Conduct Authority in the UK to knock on the doors of companies that do this in London. And according to a conversation we had in January with one of the oversight agencies, the fine to JP Morgan was a shot across the bow. That was telling everybody else, pay attention. And since what's happened, Goldman Sachs is in the same position, Citibank is in the same position, HSBC is in the same position, UBS is in the same position. All of them have disclosed in public filings that they are working with these organizations for similar problems as to what JPMC had. So this is not a little problem. This is a $350 billion addressable market. This is the biggest market I've ever chased far.
And so looking at that picture, I want to go back to one thing you said about instincts. And do you believe people are innately born with instincts, or did you develop your instincts along your way to where you are today?
Honestly, I don't know. I don't know how I would answer that. I always said I'm intuitive. I listen. I'm not a person that says a lot, but I pay attention to everything, and very few things get past me. I don't know how to answer that where I would feel like I was telling you the truth. Perhaps the most accurate answer I could give you is a combination of both. Look, I'm wrong every day of my life, just like every other guy, especially when they talk to his wife or girlfriend. But in this particular case, I was right. And I've also had a spectacular flame out of a company. So I've been wrong, even after raising a lot of money. I've been on both sides of it. In all candor, Jacob, I learned more from my failures than I did from my successes. I learn more when I mess up than when I don't.
So along your path, do you believe that you've had the mindset that allows failure? Because for a lot of people, they might not even begin, or they're afraid to take certain actions because they fear failure. So did you have this certainty or this layer of, if there's a failure, I'm going to continue? Or what is that difference for you?
An entrepreneur can't approach this with the mindset that they're going to fail. You have to go into this thinking you're going to succeed. If you don't succeed, it's okay, and you get comfortable with it. But entrepreneurs, people who run their own businesses, they don't know how to give up, right? Concession is not part of my vocabulary. And yeah, I've walked away from companies after realizing it wasn't going to work, or realizing there was a different way to do it that might be better. However, it is important to continue to always watch the landscape in front of you, watch what your competitors are doing, watch what people are doing in the space, watch what the investors are doing, and most importantly, watch what your customer use case looks like and what they're doing, right? Pay attention to that. Our first product is the ability to access Android and iMessage. We did it with Android first, then it took us almost 3 years to do it for iMessage. Nobody else can do iMessage. We're also doing something that has not been done and that the industry needs. There was actually an article about it today saying that it can't be done by one of the large technology publications. But that's also what everybody else said about iMessage and what our competitors told FINRA and the SEC and the FDIC and other agencies for the last decade. And now they've had their aha moment.
So what is that internal culture that you're building that makes those things possible?
I'm not a manager that looks over people's shoulders. What I believe in doing is basically giving them the direction and then going, okay, go. Take your hands off and hire those people that can do those things. Hire the people that can and have done it in the past. Jacob, I don't get into deep discussions with regards to salary and things like that, because to where some people, they look to cut $25,000, $50,000 off of each person. I look at it differently. I look at it as, I don't want this person to have to worry about sending their kid to private school, if that's what the kid already is. I don't want this person to worry about making their month go round, because that distracts them from what it is that we're doing. And so I pay a guy an extra 25 grand a year. That's $2,000 a month. It's $500 a week. It's $100 a day. It's a little bit over $9 an hour. When you're chasing a $350 billion addressable market, $9 an hour, to quote Tony Soprano, is guts. It's nothing. But this isn't how people look at this. I was taught this in sales training when I was in college, right? This is breaking it down to the ridiculous. But this is not how people look at it. They don't look at it and go, okay, I found the best person I want. We're $25,000 apart. If I don't give it to them, somebody else does. And then I'm going to lose a person who's going to help us build what we need. So again, for a difference of $9 an hour, is it material? It's not. But again, it's not how people look at it.
It's very powerful. I was listening to an audiobook earlier today about that sort of mindset. It was actually Jay Abraham, if you're familiar. So I do want you to expand on thinking differently, but the point he said, which encapsulates exactly what you said perfectly, is he's thinking, as a business owner, you need to be thinking, I want to do for my employee whatever is going to give them the highest probability that their marriage will succeed, that their kid will go to a good school. And that actually exactly what you said was like, wow, that's powerful, because most people just think of, okay, they're going to come here, they're going to do the job, and that's right. So
you don't hire superstars, you don't hire rock stars when you nickel and dime people, right? Look, I don't want a person eating at Morton's every night, but I also don't want a person that has to worry that they're only going to be able to feed their kids top ramen. There's got to be a balance, right? I can't do anything about that. However, if they tell us, okay, and this is a question I ask, what do you need to make your world go round? And we always have a budget. Our COO gets mad at me because sometimes I'll go over budget on that. But if we feel like this is the right person, you pull the trigger. Again, it's $9 an hour, right? It's 2,000 hours a year. That's it, right? Yeah, it's 2,000 hours a year, 50 weeks, right? 8 hours a day. But when you hire the best people, it doesn't work out to be that way, because last night our chief architect calls me and we ended up spending 2.5 hours on the phone and going over things, planning our next iteration of our platform. And so this went on till almost 11 o'clock last night. He interrupted the Warriors playoff game, which I wasn't happy about, but I had to do it.
What other areas, and I'm sure there are many, if not all the areas of the business, do you think about differently, and in which way is most beneficial or highest leverage?
I'm a selling CEO. Always have been, always will be. It's what I do. I don't like the dot the I's, cross the T's aspects of business. It's my brother's greatest strength and it's my greatest weakness. So I hire people who provide the necessary resources there and the skills to do those things, the things I don't want to do. We had a situation this week with a customer who had signed a contract and there was a problem and we needed to fix it. It went around for 2 weeks through our customer team and everything else. Finally, yesterday, I called him, had a conversation with him, and within 30 minutes, it was fixed. Sometimes people want to talk to the founder or the CEO of the company. It's how it is. And if that's the case, I'm going to pick up the damn phone. And that's it. I don't believe in an organization where everybody has a specific role, especially when you're a 15-person company. I have a friend named Tony, and Tony has founded and sold 2 companies, Harvard Business School guy, very intelligent. And Tony wears different hats. He has a sales hat. He has a finance hat. He has a human resources hat. He has a maintenance hat, and literally hats that say these words across the top. And I find it very funny because depending upon, like, we've been on a Zoom call and he'll literally reach over and change his hat. And I find it very funny, but it's also the reality of how you have to be with a business. Jacob, I started my first company in 1995 and grew it to 170 or so, 150, 160, 170 people. I don't remember. But 6 months or so into it, it was a day and I was in the lunchroom and there was coffee. I took my coffee mug into the lunchroom, and inside the sink were a couple of dozen coffee mugs. Okay. If I was at home and there were coffee mugs in the sink, what would I do? I'd wash them. That's what I did. And one of the people that I worked with walked up to me like I was doing something crazy. But that's not the case. It doesn't matter. You either succeed together or you fail together. How you get there is how you decide to work together. Is it about you or is it about something much bigger than you? It's not about me. It's about the company. This is not because of the situation that we discussed very early in this call, right? This is a legal situation. TechSmarter to me isn't a company. It's an imperative. Excuse me. Sorry. I turned it off. I apologize. I thought
that's ringtone there.
Yeah. Steely Dan.
Okay. Yeah. So tell me more about this grand vision for TechSmarter. How will the world be different? Of course, you've differentiated in various ways, one being technology is bar none ahead of the curve and will continue to, right, if your trajectory and path are keeping on current, we will continue to be that way. What is the grand vision? How will the world be different? And how will these companies experience your purpose actualized?
I don't look at TechSmarter as a company that's changing the business or changing a model. We have differentiated ourselves by building things that other people don't have. And it's provided us with a very significant market position. We're now looking, based on requests of very significant customers, at an entirely separate technological feat that will once again separate us from everybody else. When you build your product and you continue to make it better and you sharpen the blade, so to speak, you then need to start looking at what's next. You can't just live off of one. You can't be a one-trick pony. You've got to figure out the next thing that your customers are going to ask for. And if you don't address it, somebody else will. So the only way to stay relevant is to constantly iterate, to constantly grow, constantly offer things that your customers are asking for, taking the time to hear them, taking the time to look at what they need, taking the time to see what regulatory changes are coming, right? What did the latest guidance tell you? All these things are part of the way that I spend every day.
So it's a lot of the thinking that is going into this that keeps you ahead of the game. It's not necessarily all of the doing, because if you're not actually seeing the thinking first, the doing doesn't really happen, right? The doing is erroneous.
Correct.
So how would you advise someone who is starting a business in a new industry? Perhaps they have experience, but they want to come in and make a great business. How do they know where to look, and what should they be thinking about and considering as they're going through that journey of getting the thinking right?
So the easiest way, which is a misnomer to build a good business, is to build the business around something that you have a passion about. You and I talked earlier as we were getting ready to start recording about basketball, the Warriors. I've been a Warriors fan my entire life. I'm 60 years old and have been a Warriors season ticket holder for more than 25 years. Been a San Francisco Giants season ticket holder for the same. I'm very passionate about those things, but it's not a business. You got to find something that's interesting to you. Getting up for a job doesn't get you out of bed at 5 o'clock in the morning. What gets you out of bed at 5 o'clock in the morning is when you're interested in something that you're doing, that you're passionate about. It's important to you. And you also realize that it's important to other people. But most importantly, for the entrepreneur, it's finding something they're passionate about. If what happened to me in 2012, and when I say that, I don't mean to infer I'm a victim. I'm not. I made a poor choice. I did business with somebody I shouldn't have done business with, and it cost me a lot of headaches. All of that being said, that led me to having a great deal of passion about what I do. And it was something I was interested in ahead of time. This just was part of the journey and figuring out where to go. But do your prep. Look at building a business is like building a house, right? You have to start with flattening the dirt. You've got to get that ready. Then you've got to get ready to lay the foundation. You got to lay the pipes. You got to lay the electrical, right? You got to lay the sewer. This is all that preparation, right? The best analogy I could give an entrepreneur is look at it like you're building a house, because what people see is the house. What they don't realize is what they don't see. If you haven't done it, you don't understand it. But that's building a business. You have to think steps ahead of where you are so that you can be prepared when you get to where you're headed.
And so your practice for doing so, aside from, you said, reading the regulatory headlines, reading what's coming down the pipeline, what other practices do you take on a regular basis that fuel that high level of thinking?
When I need to think, I drive down to a beach near Santa Cruz called Davenport. And usually I'll throw my dog in the back of I've got a Bronco. I'll throw my dog in the back of the Bronco. Sometimes I'll throw my surfboard up on the roof and I drive down there. What I love about Davenport, there's no cell coverage. For give or take an hour, nobody can bother me. Once I get to that point, I don't get phone calls. I don't get text messages. I don't get emails. I don't get anything. That type of ability to not have those distractions is when you do your best thinking. For me, I'll drop the top on the car, throw the surfboard up, head to Davenport and go. So if I don't have the time for that, I'll head to the coast, which is 20 minutes that way. And I can be on the beach in 20 or 25 minutes. I grab a cigar, let my dog run on the beach and clear my head. And I do my thinking, right? Everybody does it differently. We all have those moments, what it is that we do for clarity, what do we do to live, right? It's for me, for most of my life, that's been basketball. I've been playing basketball since I couldn't even reach the hoop with the ball when I was 5 years old. And I've continued to play into my 60s. I hope I never have to give it up. I don't get to play as often as I used to, but I'm building a business again. By this point, I figured I'd be retired, but I tried that. It didn't work. Everybody has a different way of doing it, Jacob. You have a different way. We talked earlier, you have a baby on the way. You're going to find that thing that gives you balance, right? After Xavier's born and everything's fine, you come home and you're now becoming a family and you're acclimating to this new change, this wonderful new change that's coming in your life. You're going to see a change, right? For some people, they smoke cigars or they have a drink. For other people, it's running. So for some, it's bicycling. For others, it's just jumping in the car and taking a ride. Everybody has a different thing, but you got to find that thing that's yours, right? What is it that gives you peace? What is it that where you find that the solemn nature of the ability to think clearly? I've got a buddy that's got a big sailboat. For him, it's if he's on the water in the bay or out in the ocean. That's where he finds his best thinking. And he does it most of the time alone. He's got a 40-something foot boat and he goes out, and if he's alone, he's usually in the bay because it's safer. You don't want to go out on the ocean alone. But in the bay, depending upon the wind and the water and everything else, that's where he finds his ability to think. You got to find it. You got to search for it. It's not something that you just all of a sudden one day go, okay, light bulb, right? This is how I do it. It comes over time, right? What is it that gives you peace? What gives you balance? What feeds you for the future, right? You've got to nourish yourself. It's reading, it's time on your own, it's cigars, it's basketball, it's whatever, right? In Minnesota, maybe you go ice fishing.
Try to stay out of the cold here. Awesome. So then one question I do have is, let's say you go way back to before you started your first company. What inspired you to do that? Was there something you were pursuing, something you wanted? Because a lot of people, we all know tons of them, have great ideas or visions or things they want to do, but they, for whatever reason, don't go out and maybe they don't have the actualization potential, the catalyst that drives them to go do it. What was that experience for you that said, I need to go create something great?
My parents do it their whole life. It's all I knew. Everybody becomes an entrepreneur for a different reason, right? Solving a problem, something they have a passion about. In my case, my parents came here, they immigrated here in 1958, and I watched my parents build a life through starting businesses. In some cases, they failed. In other cases, they made decisions to do other things, right? My father started a travel agency when the travel agency business was big, built a big business, and then the second biggest firm came to him and wrote him a check, and he walked away. Everybody finds it differently. Everybody gets there in a different way. And this sounds repetitive, and I apologize for that. But again, part of an entrepreneurial journey is the individual journey. What's your journey? What is it to you? And even I found a TechSmarter with my son, and it means something different to him than it does to me, but we've worked on it together since 2014. What does it mean? What does it do? The thing, you'd probably get an entirely different set of answers if you spoke to Alex. Find something, excuse me. You know who Nolan Bushnell is? Founder of Atari?
Yes.
Right? Founder of Chuck E. Cheese. He has a saying, every person in the world has an idea in the shower. Difference is, are you the person that gets out of the shower and then goes and does something with that idea? Or is it like water and goes down the drain? That's the difference. Be that person that gets out of the shower and goes and does something. There's a lot that can be done when you work for yourself, right? Don't get me wrong. Everybody gets paid before I did. When we were starting the company, everybody got paid before I did. At times I had to go into my pocket to pay salaries. It's not an uncommon tale, right? I used credit cards to make things happen, right? But that's what you do. When you believe in what you're doing, when you have a purpose, when you have a direction and a mission, that's what you do. And if the thing you don't want to do is let money be the reason why you are not able to do it. You look at Michael Dell started Dell in a dorm room at UT using credit cards. He's using his father's or mother's credit card to pay for the computer stuff that he needed to buy. And then as soon as he got paid by selling the computer, he would pay off the credit card so he could use it again. And that's a story as old as the hills.
So when you have the purpose, the resources will come forth. You'll create them, you'll find them, you will do the actions. When that purpose is driving you strong enough, the actions eventually in some form or fashion, whether you're actually making sure of it or you get a lucky break in some senses, the resources are going to appear. If you have the creativeness, the thinking, the know-how, the ability to say, I have the energy to bring this forth, and this is what it has to be.
All those things are a part of it. Are you a Vikings fan?
Somewhat. I will enjoy a game if it's on and I'm perhaps at a party or something, but otherwise I don't put too much attention to it.
Obviously, I'm sports crazy. So that being said, look, Vince Lombardi, and I ask this because most of the time Vikings fans don't like the Packers. Okay?
Yeah, my father was from Green Bay, so I'm extremely familiar with the rivalry, and my grandpa actually, who just passed, was a Packers fan.
Vince Lombardi said something. Perfection doesn't exist. However, If you chase perfection, you can achieve excellence. I look at life that way. I'm not perfect. I'm not a million miles. I'm not a billion miles from perfect. However, if I chase perfect, I'll become excellent. And that's how I look at it. I want to do what's right. And part of building a business is it's not a popularity contest. We have conflict even in a small business regularly because you have to have the vision and you have to know where you want to go. And when the people, this literally happened today, we're preparing to bring on a big new customer. In order to make it easy, because it's a high amount of people, we've put together a video. But the video that I wanted was 180 degrees different than what we got. And so when I saw the video last night while I was watching the Warriors, I'm like, no, this is not what I want. This is not what we're being asked for. Their concerns are not the concerns that I had. This whole thing is when Jacob, to some people, text messages, the stuff on my phone, if you and I say we ran into each other at O'Hare and I sat there, I would have no hesitation going, here you go, here's my phone. Why? Because there's nothing on my phone that I worry about. There's nothing on my phone that I would be embarrassed for my mother or my grandmother to see. That's how I live. To other people, this is the most sensitive piece of information they have.
Right.
I don't look at it that way. So that being said, a thing where some people have to hold on to information and other people share it, but you've got to have, as a founder of the company, you've got to have a vision and you've got to stay true to your vision, but you also have to have the flexibility to change when that's necessary. Going back to a sailing metaphor, you've got to change your tack or you're not going to go in the right direction. You're going to end up on the rocks. So if you realize as you make decisions that you're heading towards the rocks, change your tack, come back. Sometimes you retreat, you pull your team together and you say, hey, look, this isn't working. What's wrong? And then you, as a group, go over this whole thing, and at the end of the day, someone has to make a decision. And that usually falls on the founder in a small company. In a bigger company, that changes later.
And so you've experienced exactly that. Companies, what's the largest company you said? I know your initial company was about up to 180 or so people.
Something like that, yeah.
How does things change and what structures, if someone is going through a hypergrowth phase of a company, what structures should they be focusing on getting in place in terms of communication to protect the founder in his mental energy and space to ensure he can continue to bring the vision forth?
There has to be a plan. You've got to have a plan. You've got to have a roadmap. You've got to have an idea of where you want to go. And then you've got to be able to prioritize. Of these things, which are the things that are going to take us the furthest and also address the things our customers want. And so that's how you look at these things and you say, okay, this one didn't work. Okay, exit stage left. We didn't think this one was going to work, but it did. So let's keep going down this and continuing to make it better. Flexibility, the ability to change, the ability to move quickly, the ability to give your team the necessary freedom to do the things they want to do once the plan is in place. These are all things that are hard to learn because for most people, especially most founders, they want to have their fingers in everything. And I understand it, but I'm not a technologist. I haven't written code since I was in college in the early 80s. I don't want to write code. And for me to sit there and look over our chief architect's shoulder while he's preparing the next iteration of TechSmarter, I'm in the way. And I tell the guys, I'm going to get the F out of the way. You guys know where to go, get us there.
And that comes back to what we talked about getting the right people and investing in the right people.
Exactly.
So let's say you were looking back, TechSmarter fulfilled everything that you could ever imagine. You're looking back at your life and you're feeling incredibly successful and grateful. What else would be in that picture for you? How would have TechSmarter influenced the world and what else would you have achieved?
Jacob, the funny thing is TechSmarter is not what's important to me. It is, but I'm a father first. Wow. That's what's important to me. I've raised my son pretty much alone since he was 8 years old. He's 28 now. And that's what's important to me. look, TechSmarter makes it, doesn't make it, I'm still going to be okay. So will everybody I work with. That's not going to be the end result. It's going to be a large business. I believe that within probably the next 12 months, we'll have $1 billion valuation. But at the end of the day, I'm having fun. I'm enjoying what I'm doing. I get to spend time with people whose company I enjoy. Those are the things that are important, right? It's not about money in the bank. It's not about being in, my mother and father came here from Turkey, and I was in London. I gave a speech in London last month, and a Turkish journalist approached me, and my mother's childhood friends in Turkey saw me in the newspaper in Istanbul. And that's not what's important to me. Those things are fun, right? It's nice for a minute, but a minute later, you forget about it. You keep doing what you're doing. I'm one of the luckiest people you will ever meet. And I say that in every aspect of life. I'm lucky with my friends, my family, my girlfriend, everything. I've been able to build things when people told me that it would never happen. And that's actually something that I love, is when someone tells me, oh, you can't do that. And that's when I love that aha moment. Okay, I showed you wrong, right? Don't doubt me. There's a movie with Al Pacino and Keanu Reeves, where Al Pacino is 5'6" tall, right? He's this big. But in the movie, he says, they don't know who I am. They don't see me coming. And all of a sudden, when I get there, they have that, holy shit, the tornado just arrived. That's where I want to be. I don't want you to see me coming. I'd rather just take a low profile and continue to make progress every day and build a business and have fun. Those are the things that are important to me.
That's really beautiful. And what movie was that?
Give me a second. Oh, God. Charlize Theron is in it. I just rewatched it like a month or 2 months ago. Devil's Advocate.
Okay. I'm going to have to check that one out.
He actually has that conversation on the subway in New York. It's a great scene.
Devil's Advocate. Are there any books or things that you recommend for individuals to read?
I read a lot. There's 2 books that were transformational for me. The first is by Don Miguel Ruiz, called The 4 Agreements. And the 4 Agreements are very simple. There's literally a sign with the 4 agreements sitting to the right of my monitor. Be impeccable with your word, take nothing personally, don't make assumptions, and always do your best. And those 4 things are what I look at every day of my life. The other one is a book by Angela Duckworth called Grit. And raising a child, it talks about not only children, but it also talks about having grit in life. And by the way, as an expectant father, go read Grit. It will teach us. And then, God, there's one other book that I really enjoy. Let's just stay with those. It'll come to me.
Great. So what's another or any message you want to leave the people here with who are watching this for their lives, for whatever? What do you want them to remember about you over everything else? On top, of course, that it was extremely powerful things that you did just say, as you were talking about your son and that being your purpose and the family and the people that are around you. I was getting shivers in the spine because that is, I resonate with that very, very well. So I'm sure a lot of people will.
Jacob, I don't consider myself to be memorable. Okay. I try to be a good father. I try to be a good son to my mom. I try to be a good boyfriend to Kimberly. I try to be good friends to my friends, and I try to be good to the people that I work with. They need to know they can depend upon me, that when I say something, my word is my bond, and that's it. They can absolutely depend upon what I say. As it said here, be impeccable with your word. And I would tell you that if you believe in it, even if the people around you don't give up, don't ever give up. And there might be a time where giving up is the right thing, and that's a personal choice. But don't do it because other people told you that it wasn't possible, or that you couldn't do it, because the data that you have pulled together tells you it can't be done. Then the evidence is empirical. If you do it in a way where you're like, I'll be very honest with you. My brother told me I'd never be able to do what I'm doing. And that's him and me. It's my brother and me. And he's not involved in my business at all. But he said, you'll never be able to do this. And we're proving him wrong. And I'll never say I told you. That's not really the important aspect of this. But it's not listening when you know you're right. You look at Steve Jobs, who took over Apple, and they had hundreds of different products, and he cut it down to 4 products that covered the 4 areas they need to do. You need to have the conviction to be able to change things in a way, especially if you've given it the right thought, right? If you've given it great consideration, then you're probably right. Unfortunately, a lot of people are more reactive than they should be. You have to plan more. We have our next 18 months laid out for us, and it's April of 2022. We know what we'll be doing in 18 months. But here's the thing. You got to be willing to change. As we went into COVID 2 years ago and the whole world changed, everybody asked for us to be able to be connected to Zoom, right? The platform that you and I are speaking on.
Right.
In 12 months, it completely converted from Zoom to Microsoft Teams. And if we had not been listening to our customers, we would have missed an opportunity. So listen to your customers. Ask them what they want. Take the time to pick up the phone like I did yesterday. I told you the story earlier. I picked up the phone. I called the chief compliance officer of a $40 billion private equity firm in New York. And it was a deal we were losing. And in 30 minutes, I fixed the problem. Why? Because I listened. I read the emails that were behind it. I thought about it for 3 or 4 days. And then I realized what the answer was. And then when we sent him a revised document last night that addressed his concerns, this morning we woke up, all good.
Amazing.
Listening is a big thing. What a lot of people don't do is they hear, but they don't listen. You got to listen. When someone tells you something, usually there's a reason. I feel like that was it. Outliers, Malcolm Gladwell. That's the other book that's very powerful. 10,000 hours. The theory behind outliers is that in order to become excellent at something, you need to do it for 10,000 hours. Bill Gates became a great programmer because he programmed for 10,000 hours before he started Microsoft.
And there you have it. An amazing interview. Nuri, definitely would love to have you back for another one at some time. Sure, we're only just scratching the surface here. So is it TechSmarter.com? Is that where people can find TechSmarter?
Yeah, it's TXTSMARTER.com, or you can spell it text with the E. We have both domains.
Wonderful.
It took me 4 years to buy the second domain. I tried for 4 years.
It's probably a story in and of itself right there.
Jacob, interestingly, I tried. Guy wouldn't respond to emails. I got his phone number, wouldn't respond to phone calls. One day I get an email out of the blue. It went to our info@TechSmarter email. And I'm like, do you want to buy TechSmarter.com? That's TEXT Smarter. Yeah, how much? He gave me a quote. Okay, I don't think it's worth that much, but so we went back and forth. We did a little negotiation, right? A little horse trading. And being a guy whose family's from Turkey, it's been my blood. And I love the deal. So we cut a deal. We sent him a wire and we were done. And took me, from the first time that we did that, it took us 4 years.
Wow.
Again, don't give up.
Remarkable. Everybody, check out TechSmarter. If you are potentially a customer, definitely a great person to get connected to, Nuri Otus. And we will see you in the next interview. Thank you. Hey everyone, thank you for watching this episode of Titans Up today. What did you learn from it? Make sure to drop a comment below with your most valuable insight so that other people can engage in the conversation around what this speaker brought to the table. And then on another front, make sure to subscribe so that every time we drop a new episode, you will be notified. And that way you can keep fueling your dreams and your brain with fresh insights which can help you along your journey and along your path to your goals. So thank you so much again, and I look forward to seeing you in the next interview.